The massive alien vessel descended through Earth's atmosphere with a light show that would have made Las Vegas envious. Blue and purple rays cascaded from its hull, forming intricate patterns against the evening sky. What the aliens likely intended as an awe-inspiring arrival came across more like an overdone holiday display. Dr. Ju Park stood on the landing pad, clipboard clutched against her chest, squinting upward with an expression that mixed curiosity with mild disappointment. The breeze from the ship's descent tousled her dark hair as she made quick notes on her tablet. "Is that supposed to be their advanced cloaking technology?" she asked, gesturing at the shimmering field surrounding the ship that occasionally flickered, revealing the vessel's true outline. Beside her, Director Taho Kim adjusted his glasses and shrugged. His military posture hadn't relaxed despite the 3-hour wait for the aliens to complete their atmospheric entry procedures. "Apparently, they think we can't detect their energy emissions. We picked them up from beyond Mars," Ju said with a small smile. "Don't tell them that. Let's not hurt their feelings on day one." The assembled welcome committee, a modest group of scientists, military personnel, and government officials, watched as the vessel finally settled onto the landing pad with a pneumatic hiss. Unlike the dramatic scenes from science fiction films, there was no crowd of ordinary citizens, no news cameras. The world governments had agreed to a controlled first contact, away from population centers. After a delay that stretched patience thin, a seam appeared in the ship's hull, widening into a doorway. Light poured out, briefly blinding the human observers before their eyes adjusted. The Galactic Union representatives emerged with what could only be described as regal pompousness. Tall, blue-skinned beings with elongated limbs and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on their faces. They wore elaborate ceremonial robes with medals and gems that caught the sunlight. The leader wore a headdress that added nearly a foot to his already impressive height. Ju noted how they paused dramatically at the top of the ramp, clearly expecting gasps of wonder that never came. Instead, the human delegation waited patiently, some checking their watches. The aliens descended slowly. Their body language, even across species, registered confusion at the casual reception. No bowing, no prostration, not even applause. Their translator, a small hovering device that preceded them, spoke in a booming voice that seemed unnecessarily loud. "People of Earth, the glorious representatives of the Galactic Union, have arrived humanity to the magnificence of intergalactic civilization." Director Kim winced at the volume. "We can hear you fine," he said mildly. The lead alien made a gesture, and the translator adjusted its volume. "We bring greetings from 2,347 sentient species across 8 galactic arms. Welcome to Earth," said the UN Secretary General, stepping forward with an extended hand. "We're pleased to establish peaceful contact." The alien hesitated, apparently unfamiliar with handshakes, before awkwardly extending his own 7-fingered hand. The simple gesture seemed to throw off whatever elaborate greeting they had prepared. Once the formalities concluded, Dr. Park couldn't contain her scientific curiosity any longer. She stepped closer to the ship, scanning it with a handheld device. "Fascinating," she said, already examining their propulsion system through the data on her scanner. "You're still using plasma containment fields for your FTL drives. We've been theorizing about quantum mesh alternatives for years." The alien ambassador blinked all 4 of his eyes in sequence, from top to bottom, and then side to side. The gesture conveyed obvious surprise. "Your species has theorized about quantum mesh propulsion." "Oh, we have working prototypes," Director Kim said casually. "Just hasn't been cost-effective to scale up yet. Your design uses a lot of rare earth elements, doesn't it? We've been experimenting with synthetic alternatives." The aliens exchanged worried glances. The tallest one, who wore the most elaborate robes, leaned down to whisper something to a smaller companion. The device at his wrist, some kind of computer, flashed rapidly. Our intelligence indicated your species had only achieved rudimentary spaceflight, said a female alien toward the back of the group. Her skin was a lighter shade of blue, almost turquoise. Jiwoo smiled politely. Our public space programs, yes. But you know how it is with competitive species. Not everything makes it into the public domain. Would you be interested in touring our vessel? Offered the lead alien, clearly attempting to regain control of the encounter. Our technology is thousands of years ahead of anything you have achieved. We'd be delighted, Jiwoo replied, already moving toward the ramp before being invited. I'm particularly interested in your atmospheric recycling systems. Do you use bioengineered algae or chemical scrubbers? Inside the ship, the aliens' confusion only deepened. Rather than being overwhelmed by the technology, the human scientists asked pointed, specific questions. When shown the ship's central computer core, a massive crystalline structure that the aliens proudly announced could perform calculations at speeds unimaginable to humans, Dr. Park pulled out her phone. "May I?" she asked, before scanning the device. She studied the readings with interest. "Impressive processing power, though your quantum entanglement looks unstable at the edges. We found that shielding the core with a layer of artificially grown diamond boron lattice helps maintain coherence." The alien technician stared at her. You have quantum computers." "Of course," said Jiwoo. "Not quite this size yet, but the fundamentals are similar. Your cooling system is elegant, though." By the time they reached the engine room, the aliens had dropped most of their ceremonial pretense. The chief engineer, a stockier blue being with intricate tattoos covering his arms, was engaged in a heated technical discussion with Director Kim. "But the containment field would collapse if you reduced the power input that much," the alien insisted. "Not if you reconfigure the magnetic bottle to a toroidal shape instead of spherical," Kim countered. "We've run the simulations. It's 30% more efficient and reduces radiation leakage." The alien engineer looked torn between offense and fascination. As they returned to the main deck, the ambassador was having a hushed conversation with what appeared to be his superiors via some form of holographic communication. He looked increasingly distressed. "Is everything all right?" Jiwoo asked innocently. Yes, the ambassador said quickly. "We are adjusting our cultural exchange protocols. Your species is not what we expected." "We get that a lot," she replied with a smile. As the first day of contact wound down, the aliens returned to their ship, ostensibly to rest, but more likely to reassess their approach. The human delegation gathered in their temporary headquarters nearby. "Well, that was interesting," said Jiwoo, reviewing her notes. "Their technology is advanced, but not revolutionary. It's like they stopped innovating centuries ago." Director Kim nodded thoughtfully. "They expected us to be primitive and awed. I don't think they've encountered a species that developed along different technological lines before." "Do you think we should tell them about the quantum tunneling project?" asked one of the younger scientists. Jiwoo and Kim exchanged glances. "Let's not overwhelm them on the first day," Jiwoo said diplomatically. "I think the Galactic Union has some adjusting to do." Outside, the alien ship glowed softly in the gathering darkness, its lights significantly dimmer than during their arrival. Inside, the aliens were undoubtedly reconsidering everything they thought they knew about humanity. And humanity, true to form, was already thinking about how to improve alien technology. The sleek starship Persistence * glided through the shimmering tunnel of folded space, its hull vibrating with energy that would have torn apart most Earth vessels just 3 months ago. Captain Junho Lee sat in the command chair, his steady hands guiding the ship with the confidence of someone who had been navigating the stars for decades rather than weeks. "Engineering reports all systems running at 115% efficiency," said Lieutenant Do-Yeon Kang from his station. "The modifications are holding better than expected." Junho nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. Earth's first official diplomatic vessel was something of a wonder, a hybrid creation that combined human ingenuity with alien technology. After the Galactic Union's rather underwhelming first contact, Earth's engineers had thrown themselves into understanding, reverse engineering, and improving the alien tech they'd been given access to. "Status of our escort?" Juno asked, glancing at the tactical display where two Union vessels flanked them at what should have been a matching speed. Communications Officer Su Min-yoon turned from her console, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "They're falling behind, sir. Again." Their captain sounds frustrated. "Open the channel," Juno said, straightening his uniform jacket. The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of the Union escort vessel. The captain, a tall, green-scaled being with elegant head frills, looked distinctly unhappy. "Human vessel," the alien said. "You are exceeding recommended FTL velocity by 22%. Our navigational charts indicate this region has subspace distortions. Reduce speed immediately." "We've already compensated for the distortions," Juno replied calmly. "Our sensors mapped them when we entered the sector. We can transmit the data if you'd like." The alien captain's frills flattened against his skull, a sign of either irritation or alarm. "That's not necessary, but you must maintain escort formation. We're arriving 3 standard cycles ahead of schedule," announced Suman with a hint of pride. "At current velocity, we'll reach the galactic core in 36 hours rather than the planned 72. The Union captain's eyes widened. "Impossible. Your FTL drives cannot achieve such velocities. They are based on our own Mark VII designs, which have hard physical limitations." "We made some tweaks," replied Suman with a smile. "Removed the redundant stabilizers. They were actually creating drag in subspace." "Remove the alien seemed at a loss for words. "Those stabilizers are essential safety components." Engineer Minja Ryu spoke up from his station. "Not really. They were designed for an earlier drive configuration. In the current setup, they're just wasting energy and creating turbulence. We replaced them with a modified field harmonizer of our own design." The alien captain stared at them for a long moment before speaking again. "Maintain your position, human vessel. We will attempt to match your velocity." As the communication ended, Juno exchanged glances with his senior staff. "They're not happy." "They haven't been happy since we launched," said Minja with a shrug. "You'd think they'd be pleased we fixed their ships for them." The journey continued with the Union escorts struggling to keep pace. By the time they approached the massive space station that served as the Galactic Union's diplomatic hub, the Persistence had gained such a lead that they had to orbit the station twice while waiting for their escorts to catch up. The station itself was impressive even by the crew's now jaded standards. A massive wheel-shaped structure with sprouting arms and towers, orbiting a central star that had been partially enclosed in a Dyson sphere. Light gleamed off countless docking ports where ships from hundreds of worlds were moored. "Quite a neighborhood we've moved into," Junho remarked as they finally received docking clearance. Ambassador Hyunwoo Baek joined them on the bridge, dressed in a simple but elegant dark suit rather than the elaborate ceremonial garments the Union had suggested for the occasion. "Remember, everyone, we're here to establish friendly relations. Try not to point out too many flaws in their technology on the first day." The crew chuckled, but they understood the seriousness behind his words. Earth was the new kid on the block, and while their technological adaptability had caught the Union off guard, they were still a single planet facing an empire of thousands of worlds. After docking procedures completed, the human delegation prepared to disembark. Unlike the Union representatives, who typically arrived bearing ceremonial gifts and wearing formal regalia, the humans approached the welcoming ceremony carrying tablets and sensor equipment rather than presents. "For data collection," Minji explained when Junho raised an eyebrow. "This station's power distribution system is fascinating. Incredibly wasteful, but fascinating." The airlock cycled open to reveal a large reception area filled with alien dignitaries of various species. At the center stood a tall, willowy being with luminescent skin and flowing robes that seemed to shift color with each movement. This, according to their briefing, was the Prime Counselor, one of the 12 highest officials in the Union government. A small blue-skinned alien hurried to meet them, clearly their assigned liaison. "Welcome to Central Station," she said through a translator device. "You must follow protocol precisely. This is a great honor for a new species." She guided them forward, whispering urgent instructions. "When you approach the Prime Counselor, you bow deeply and present your credentials. Then you wait to be acknowledged before speaking." Ambassador Bake nodded politely, but when they reached the Prime Counselor, he simply extended his hand instead of bowing. "You're supposed to bow before the Prime Counselor," hissed their liaison, looking mortified. "Oh, sorry," said Ambassador Hyunwoo with an easy smile. "We usually just shake hands. More efficient." The assembled dignitaries gasped collectively. The Prime Counselor stared at the extended hand with an expression that even across species barriers clearly showed confusion. "This is how humans establish peaceful contact," Hyunwoo explained. "It shows we are meeting as equals, with open hands holding no weapons." After a moment's hesitation, the Prime Counselor extended a long-fingered hand and awkwardly mimicked the handshake. "Welcome to the Galactic Union, representatives of Earth. Your directness is noted." The ceremony continued with various officials making speeches about the grandeur and benevolence of the Union. The humans listened politely, though several could be seen taking notes or scanning their surroundings with barely concealed interest. "They use quantum entanglement for their communications network," Minjae whispered to Suman, "but their information processing is still using crystalline storage." Interesting choice. The Prime Counselor's speech reached its conclusion. "And thus we welcome Earth into the community of civilized worlds, as a Category 3 developing planet under Union protection and guidance." Ambassador Bake cleared his throat. "Thank you for the welcome, Prime Counselor. However, I should clarify that Earth is not seeking protection status. We're here to establish mutual diplomatic relations between equals." Another shocked silence fell over the gathering. "But your species has only recently achieved faster-than-light travel," said one official. "The standard classification is clear." "We may be new to the galactic scene," Hyunwoo replied, "but we've reviewed your classification criteria. Technology isn't the only measure of civilization. Earth's cultural diversity, scientific methodology, and adaptive capabilities should place us at least at Category 2. The Prime Counselor's skin flashed with patterns that might have indicated alarm. "This is highly irregular. Classifications have existed for millennia. Perhaps it's time for a fresh perspective," suggested Hyunwoo. "We've brought some proposals for technological exchange that might interest you." As the diplomatic team moved to the negotiation chambers, Captain Juno remained behind with a small security detail, watching the aliens' reactions. "They really didn't expect us to question their system, did they?" asked Lieutenant Kang quietly. "They've been the big fish in the pond for too long," Juno replied. "But the universe is a big place. I suspect we're not the only ones who've had these thoughts." He glanced around the station, noting other alien delegations watching them, with what could only be described as keen interest. Perhaps Earth wasn't the only world that found the Union's hierarchy less than impressive. Dr. Junga Choi stood behind the one-way glass, watching as the Union Assessment Committee examined Earth's technology. The room on the other side was filled with objects from her homeworld. Everything from quantum computers to medical devices to simple household gadgets. The 5 alien inspectors moved from table to table, scanning, prodding, and occasionally making dismissive gestures. "Level 4 civilization, at most," declared Union Inspector Zarthal, the lead examiner. His long purple fingers waved over a microprocessor with obvious disdain. "They've barely mastered interplanetary travel." Junga tapped notes into her tablet, keeping her face neutral despite her growing irritation. Beside her, Engineer Minho Kang folded his arms across his chest. "That's the 3rd time he's mentioned our level," Minho whispered. "What exactly are they measuring?" According to their classification system, Level 4 means capable of limited space travel, but requiring guidance to avoid self-destruction. Jumga replied quietly. Essentially, they think we're children. Inside the assessment room, a thin green alien with 4 arms carefully disassembled a standard Earth laptop. Primitive silicon architecture, she announced, with minimal quantum components. Processor speeds approximately 1/8 of Union Standard. Yet they've achieved artificial intelligence algorithms comparable to our own, noted a smaller inspector studying the screen. Their computational systems are strangely effective despite primitive architecture. I think they're missing the point of our design philosophy, Jumga whispered to Minho. Our systems prioritize innovation and adaptability, not just raw processing power. Minho nodded. They build technology to last centuries without changing. We build ours expecting to improve it next year. The observer's room door slid open, and Ambassador Hyun-woo Baek entered, looking tired but amused. How's the inspection going? About as expected, Jumga replied. They're rating us somewhere between clever apes and promising youngsters. Hyun-woo chuckled. Their entire civilization runs on hierarchy. They can't comprehend dealing with us as equals, so they need to categorize us first. He glanced through the glass. What are they examining now? Our medical tech, said Minho, pointing to where Zarthal was scanning a portable MRI device. They seemed particularly unimpressed with our neural interfaces. Inside the room, the inspectors huddled together, speaking in low tones. Their universal translators were deliberately set to private mode, but Jumga had placed a small device of her own design near the glass. It wasn't perfect, but it caught fragments of conversation. Concerning how quickly they've evolution rate suggests. Should be classified as potential. Security protocols. Impossible for them to have developed this independently. The lead inspector turned abruptly toward the glass, almost as if he could sense they were listening. His 6 eyes narrowed. I think we've seen enough, he announced loudly. The humans may return. Hyun-woo straightened his tie. Showtime, he said with a wink, before heading toward the door that connected to the assessment room. Jumga and Minho followed, entering the sterile white space where their planet's technological achievements were spread out like museum pieces. The inspectors had arranged themselves in a semicircle, their postures stiff and formal. The Technological Assessment Committee has completed its initial evaluation, Zarthal stated. Earth will be provisionally classified as a Level 4 civilization, with review scheduled in 50 standard cycles. Hyun-woo maintained a pleasant expression. Thank you for your thorough examination. However, I believe there may be aspects of our technological development that merit further consideration. The green 4-armed inspector tilted her head. Such as, for instance, Jumga stepped forward, our adaptive manufacturing processes. While individual components may not match Union standards in raw power, our production systems can retool completely in days rather than years. Adaptability is not a primary metric in civilization assessment, Zarthal replied dismissively. Stability and mastery are the foundations of advanced societies. Minho raised an eyebrow. With respect, isn't the ability to respond to new challenges equally important? Our historical records show 17 major shifts in energy production methods in the past century alone. Such rapid changes indicate instability, said the smallest inspector. Truly advanced civilizations perfect a technology before implementing it. Or they stagnate, Jumga said quietly. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. The inspectors exchanged glances that even across species clearly communicated surprise at her boldness. Perhaps, Hyun-woo intervened smoothly, we could continue this philosophical discussion during the tour of your facilities. I believe that was next on our schedule. Zarthal seemed relieved by the change of subject. Yes, we will show you the central manufacturing hub. It is among our most impressive achievements. The group moved through the station's vast corridors, passing members of dozens of alien species. Jumga noticed how they all gave way to the inspectors, eyes lowered or appendages folded in gestures of deference. The hierarchy was everywhere, woven into the fabric of their society. They entered a massive observation deck overlooking space. Through the transparent walls, they could see enormous construction platforms where ships and station components were being assembled. Robotic arms moved with precision, adding prefabricated sections to skeletal frameworks. The central manufacturing hub can produce a medium-class vessel in 12 Union cycles, Zarthel stated proudly. It has remained unchanged in design for over 300 cycles, a testament to its perfection. Junga watched the construction process with professional interest. The scale was impressive, certainly, but the methodology seemed cumbersome. Each component was built completely before being attached to the main structure. Minho studied the process for several minutes before innocently asking, "Have you considered using modular assembly? You could reduce construction time by 60%. The union representatives stared at him in silence. "I'm sorry," Minho continued, not seeming to notice their reaction, "but your current process requires each section to be complete before installation. If you built the framework first, then assembled modules in parallel, you could have multiple teams working simultaneously. The union method ensures perfect quality control," Zarthel finally responded. "Each section is fully tested before integration." But it was too late. The humans had already begun to make their mark on the Galactic Union, one simple idea at a time. The emergency alarms echoed through the massive corridors of the Union Capital Station, their wailing pitch designed to cut through the normal background noise of 1,000 different species going about their business. Red warning lights flashed along the walls, turning the usual white and gold splendor into something more ominous. Captain Junho Lee was in the Earth delegation's quarters when the alarms began. He had been reviewing reports from home when his communication device lit up with an urgent message from Ambassador Hyunwoo. "All diplomatic personnel to Central Command immediately," the message read. Junho grabbed his jacket and was out the door in seconds, joining the flow of aliens rushing through the corridors. Unlike the humans, who had been on the station for only 3 weeks, the Union species knew exactly where to go and what to do. They separated into color-coded groups, following evacuation protocols that had probably been unchanged for centuries. When Junho reached Central Command, he found the massive chamber already filled with representatives from dozens of worlds. At the center, the Emergency Council, 12 senior officials from the founding species of the Union, stood around a holographic display of a star system. Ambassador Hyunwoo spotted Junho and waved him over to where the human delegation had gathered. Dr. Ju Park and Engineer Minho Kang were already there, their faces serious as they studied the hologram. "What's happening?" Junho asked. "The Belfry system," Ju explained, pointing to the display. "There's a pulsar nearby that's suddenly destabilized. It's releasing massive radiation bursts directly toward their homeworld." Junho studied the simulation. The pulsar, a rapidly spinning neutron star, was firing deadly beams of radiation like a lighthouse gone haywire. The next major pulse would sweep across the Belfry planet in less than 5 days. One of the council members, a tall insectoid being, raised his upper limbs for silence. "The Emergency Council has assessed the situation," he announced, his translator broadcasting in the standard Union language. "The Belfry homeworld has a population of 8.3 billion. Our evacuation protocols can relocate approximately 5.7 billion individuals within 17 cycles. Casualties are projected at 30%. A horrified murmur swept through the chamber. The Belfry representatives, slender beings with iridescent skin and elaborate head crests, visibly wilted at the news. 17 cycles? Minho whispered. "That's almost 20 Earth days. But the radiation pulse will hit in 5 days, Ju said. Captain Junho stepped forward before he could stop himself. "Excuse me," he called out, his voice cutting through the uproar. "What shielding options have been considered?" The council members turned toward him, some with expressions that even across species barriers clearly read as annoyance at the interruption. "The Belfry world has planetary shields, of course," said one council member, but they are designed for meteor defense, not radiation of this magnitude. Then strengthen them, Junho suggested. Impossible in the time frame, replied another counselor dismissively. Shield upgrades require specialized equipment that would take cycles to manufacture and deploy. Captain Junho slammed his hand on the conference table. That's unacceptable. There has to be a way to protect those people. A silence fell over the chamber. The humans' outburst had broken protocol, and many of the aliens seemed shocked by his directness. What would humans suggest? Asked the counselor sarcastically. Your species has barely mastered atmospheric travel. This is beyond your expertise. Ambassador Hyunwoo stepped forward smoothly. Perhaps it is precisely because we are not bound by traditional thinking that we might offer a fresh perspective, he said diplomatically. May we examine the technical specifications of the current shield system? The council members exchanged glances, then the lead counselor nodded reluctantly. It would do no harm, he conceded. Though I remind you that Union emergency protocols have been refined over thousands of years. Within minutes, Juwoo and Minho were hunched over terminals, reviewing the Belfry defense systems while Union technicians looked on with a mixture of amusement and concern. Captain Junho and Ambassador Hyunwoo joined a secondary planning session focused on evacuation logistics. Your ships can only carry 500 passengers each, Shunho asked, reviewing the fleet manifest. That seems inefficient. They are designed primarily for cargo, explained a Union logistics officer. Passenger conversion requires significant reconfiguration. On Earth, we design our vessels with rapid conversion in mind, Junho said. It's a core principle of our emergency management. The officer tilted his head. But emergencies are rare. Rare doesn't mean impossible, Junho replied. 3 hours later, the humans had completely upended the Union's response plans. Engineer Minho had reprogrammed Union transport algorithms to prioritize high-density population centers and maximize ship capacity. The new system could move nearly twice as many people in the same time frame. Meanwhile, in the SHIELD Control Center, Dr. Juwoo directed the modification of SHIELD generators alongside a team of initially skeptical but increasingly impressed Union engineers. If we reconfigure these to create a dispersal field instead of a barrier, we can deflect 80% of the radiation, she explained, her hands moving rapidly over the control interface. The shields don't need to block the radiation completely. They just need to scatter it enough to reduce the intensity to survivable levels. But the emitters aren't designed for that pattern, protested the chief Belfry engineer. So we modify them, Juwoo said simply. The basic physics is the same. By the end of the day, the atmosphere in Central Command had transformed from resigned tragedy to cautious hope. The Union officials watched in disbelief as the humans, using Union equipment in ways never intended, created a solution in days that would have taken their best minds years, if they had thought of it at all. The lead counselor approached Ambassador Hyunwoo as the final simulation showed a survival rate of over 95%. Your people think differently, the counselor said. It wasn't exactly a compliment, but it wasn't criticism either. We've had to, Hyunwoo replied. Earth has faced many crises throughout our history. We've learned to adapt quickly or perish. The shield modifications require implementation on site, the counselor continued. We would normally send Union engineers, but given the circumstances, our team would be honored to assist, Hyunwoo said immediately. Within hours, the Persistence was prepped for emergency deployment to the Belfry system. Captain Junho oversaw the loading of equipment while Juwoo and Minho finalized their implementation plans. I've never seen the Union move this fast, remarked a Belfry official who had come to thank them. His iridescent skin shimmered with what the humans had learned was an expression of deep emotion. They usually require multiple committee approvals for any emergency action. Sometimes bureaucracy needs a crisis to remember its purpose, Junho replied. As the Persistence prepared to depart, A crowd of Union officials and representatives from various worlds gathered in the docking bay. It was an unusual sight. Union species rarely mingled outside formal functions. "They're here to see what happens," Juwu observed. "We've disrupted their worldview." "Good," said Minho with a rare smile. "Maybe next time they'll consider modular assembly for their ships." The journey to the Belfry system took 18 hours at maximum speed. Upon arrival, they found a planet in chaos. The beautiful blue-green world was surrounded by ships of all sizes as the evacuation continued, but it was clearly progressing too slowly. The Persistence took up position near the main shield generator orbital platform. Juwu and Minho, along with a team of Union engineers who had volunteered to help, began the complex process of reconfiguring the planetary defense system. "The concept is simple," Juwu explained to the Belfry engineers. "Instead of trying to create a solid barrier, we're creating a diffraction field that will spread the radiation over a larger area, reducing its intensity. Like turning a laser into a floodlight," Minho added, using a metaphor the aliens surprisingly understood. As they worked, Union officials monitored their progress with increasing amazement. The humans worked in ways that seemed chaotic, trying solutions, discarding them when they failed, building on what worked, all at a pace that left the methodical Union engineers struggling to keep up. "How do you know this will work?" asked one official. "Your simulations were based on incomplete data." "We don't know for certain," Juwu admitted as she calibrated another emitter. "But we know the physics is sound, and sometimes you have to act on the best information available." The official seemed troubled by this answer, but continued to assist. With less than 6 hours remaining before the radiation pulse would reach the planet, the modified shield system came online. The emitters, now arranged in a new pattern, created a shimmering field around the planet that was visible even from space, a testament to the enormous energy being manipulated. On the surface, billions of Belfry looked up at their transformed sky and wondered if the strange visitors from a distant world had saved them or doomed them. When the radiation wave finally hit, the shield flickered and strained but held. The deadly energy spread and dispersed across the shield, much of it redirected harmlessly into space. Radiation levels on the surface rose, but remained within survivable parameters. As the crisis passed, Captain Junho stood on the bridge of the Persistence and watched the celebration erupting across the Union communication channels. The humans had done what the Union thought impossible, not because they were more advanced, but because they thought differently. "Think they'll reconsider our Level 4 classification now?" he asked Ambassador Hyunwoo with a smile. "I believe," Hyunwoo replied, "that the Union has just received an education they never expected, and it's only just beginning." 6 months after the Belfry crisis, the Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Union buzzed with tension. The magnificent circular hall, with its soaring crystal dome and ancient council seats arranged in perfect hierarchical order, had witnessed thousands of years of galactic governance. Today, however, the carefully maintained order seemed on the verge of collapse. Union Intelligence Officer Vexmore stood at the center of the chamber, his normally gray skin flushed purple with stress as he delivered his report. "The humans have shared improved reactor designs with the Krell worlds," he stated, his voice echoing through the stunned silence. 3 Krell planets have already implemented the new technology, increasing their energy production by 320%. The Grand Council chamber erupted in outrage. Representatives from dozens of senior Union species rose from their seats, shouting over one another in a cacophony that overwhelmed the translation systems. "The Krell are a Category 3 species. They aren't permitted access to such technology," bellowed the Zentari representative, slamming all 4 of his fists on his council table. "This violates 17 separate Union regulations on technology transfer," added another counselor. "The balance of power in the Outer Rim will be destabilized," warned a third. Prime Counselor Zalthur, the ancient leader of the Union's founding species, raised his glowing scepter. The chamber gradually fell silent as the ceremonial gesture demanded. Ambassador Hyun-woo Baek of Earth, the Prime Counselor's voice was cold and controlled. You will explain this unauthorized action. Ambassador Hyun-woo stood calmly at the center of the storm. His simple black suit contrasted sharply with the elaborate ceremonial garments of the Union representatives, yet somehow he commanded the room with his quiet presence. With respect, artificial limitations on technological development seemed counterproductive to us, he said, his voice steady. The Krell faced an energy crisis. They asked for help, and we provided it. The Krell were scheduled to receive improved energy technology in 73 cycles after completing their societal stability assessments. Vexmore countered. The Union has a careful plan for species advancement. And who created this plan? Han asked. Who decides which species deserves which technology, and when? The question hung in the air. No one spoke for several moments. The founding species, naturally, Prime Counselor Zalthur finally responded. Those with the wisdom and experience to guide developing civilizations. And the economic and military benefits that come from controlling such advancement have nothing to do with these decisions. Hyun-woo's question was delivered politely, but its impact rippled through the chamber. Outside the council chambers, on the massive space station that served as the Union's capital, evidence of Earth's growing influence was everywhere. In just half a year, humans had established themselves throughout Union space in ways that defied all precedent. In the commercial sector, Minho Kang stood in the center of what had once been a traditional Union manufacturing facility. Now, the vast space hummed with activity as workers from 17 different species collaborated on a modular production line that assembled Starship components at triple the previous rate. Efficiency is up another 12% this month, reported his Krell assistant, Traz. The feathered alien checked figures on her tablet with obvious pride. The new shift rotation system is working well. Good, Minho nodded. How are the apprentices from Sector 9 progressing? Quickly. The Vulturi particularly have a natural talent for precision work. Minho smiled. 6 months ago, the Vulturi had been classified as a Category 4 species, deemed suitable only for basic labor. Now they were showing engineering aptitude that surprised everyone, except the humans. Within months, previously subjugated species were forming trade agreements with Earth. Human consulting firms spread across the galaxy, offering improvements to everything from agriculture to weapons systems. What made the humans unique wasn't superior technology. It was their willingness to share knowledge without the hierarchical restrictions the Union had maintained for millennia. On the medical research station orbiting Centra Prime, Dr. Ju Park worked alongside scientists from 30 different worlds. The project, developing treatments for a neurodegenerative disease affecting multiple Union species, had been stalled for decades before the humans arrived. The problem was compartmentalization, Ju explained to a visiting Union official. Each research team was only given access to data from their own work. No one could see the complete picture. But security protocols require, the official began. Security against what? Ju interrupted gently. Knowledge isn't dangerous. It's how you use it that matters. The official had no answer. The Union's endless security classifications and information restrictions were so deeply ingrained that few ever questioned them anymore. The changes weren't universally welcomed. Many of the senior Union species saw their privileged positions threatened. Trade monopolies that had existed for thousands of years were crumbling as formerly dependent worlds began developing their own industries with human assistance. Back in the council chamber, the debate had grown heated. You've upended 10,000 years of order, accused Prime Counselor Zalthur, rising from his throne-like seat to face Ambassador Hyun-woo directly. Do you understand what you've done? The Union maintains peace through careful balance. Does it? Asked a new voice. Captain Junho Lee entered the chamber, accompanied by representatives from 20 formerly lower-tier worlds. Their presence on the council floor, a space traditionally reserved only for Category 1 and 2 species, was itself a violation of protocol that sent shocked whispers around the room. The hive worlds of Sector 12 have doubled their food production using Earth agricultural methods, Junho said. The Trellix Confederation has reduced infant mortality by 80% with basic medical knowledge we provided. The Krell worlds no longer depend on Union energy supplies that were often selectively distributed during political disagreements. The Zinteri representative's skin darkened with anger. You accuse the Union of using resources as political leverage. I merely observe that when people have the means to meet their own needs, they make better allies than when they're kept dependent, Junho replied calmly. The debate continued for hours, with arguments growing increasingly philosophical. At its core was a fundamental question. Was the Union's purpose to maintain stability through control, or to help all species reach their potential? As the session finally adjourned without resolution, Captain Junho found himself on the observation deck of the station. The vast window looked out on the spectacular galactic core, its swirling stars and cosmic clouds forming patterns of breathtaking beauty. He sensed someone approach and turned to find Prime Counselor Zalthur beside him. In the half-light of the deck, away from ceremony and protocol, the ancient alien seemed smaller, almost vulnerable. Captain, the counselor acknowledged him with a slight nod. I wonder if you truly understand what you've begun. Change, Junho said simply. The Union has maintained peace for 10 millennia, Zalthur said. Species that once waged genocidal wars against each other now trade and cooperate. Is that achievement worth nothing? It's worth everything, Junho replied. But at what cost? How many worlds were kept from reaching their potential? How many species were deemed not ready for advancement that could have saved lives? The counselor was silent for a long moment. Perhaps, he finally said, it is easy to criticize when you haven't witnessed the horrors that can come from unchecked technological growth. The Union's founders saw entire systems destroyed in the Cataclysm Wars. I understand caution, Junho said, but caution became control, and control became stagnation. They stood in silence, watching the stars. You've upended 10,000 years of order, Zalthur said again, but this time his tone held more weariness than accusation. Captain Junho gazed out at the stars from the observation deck. Perhaps it needed upending. Your empire was stagnant, safe, but not growing. And what will replace it? Asked the counselor. Something better, replied Junho with a smile. We're nothing if not efficient. The old counselor made a sound that might have been a laugh. You know, Captain, in all my centuries, I've never encountered a species quite like humans. Most are either too timid or too aggressive. You manage to be neither, yet both. We've had a complicated history, Junho admitted. We've made terrible mistakes and learned hard lessons. Perhaps that's why we see potential where you see danger. As they stood there, ships of all sizes moved across the starscape before them. One vessel particularly caught Junho's attention, a newly designed transport built through collaboration between humans, Krell engineers, and Vulturi precision workers. Its sleek form represented something new in the galaxy, technology created not by decree from above, but by cooperation among equals. Change is coming, Counselor, Junho said softly. The question isn't whether it happens, but how we shape it. And if it leads to chaos? Zalthur asked. Then we'll face that together too, Junho replied. That's one thing humans have always been good at, finding our way through chaos to something better on the other side. As dawn light from the station's artificial sun began to illuminate the observation deck, representatives from a dozen worlds approached, seeking Earth's delegation for yet more consultations and partnerships. The new galactic order was taking shape, one conversation at a time. And the stars, unchanging for millennia, seemed somehow brighter.